Can you predict crop disease before it happens? That's what we're talking about on this episode of Blueprint to Yield. Hi, my name is Mike Evans. I'm here with Jared Cook, Luke Holst from Calibrated Agronomy, and on today's episode of Blueprint to Yield, we're going to talk about can you predict crop disease before it happens? And Jared, why don't you take us through the disease triangle? I think that's something that the industry knows, but not very well when we talk in Calibrated Agronomy.
Yeah, so Mike, the disease triangle, if you think of it, of our triangle, we've got three main pillars. We've got a pathogen, we have the environment, we have a host. And generally speaking, those three need to align before a disease can be present. Mm-hmm. And so we can break this down and look at each individual element if we want to. That's where it really gets fun, looking at the disease triangle and what constitutes a disease.
But I think we understand host, we understand the pathogen really well, but I think the environment is kind of something that we uniquely here at Calibrated Agronomy look at differently. You know, environment, everybody thinks hot, humidity, rain, like we got right now behind us. But I think in environment, we talk about like residue, the soil, pathogens and that. Can you kind of elaborate on the environment just as an option?
Well, yeah, think about behind us right now, you've got just short of 3/4 of an inch of rain in a very tight window of time. Odds are there's going to be sections of your soil that have gone anaerobic. That opens the door to all sorts of different outcomes, pathogens perhaps. It becomes a compounded element if you start considering what's my previous residue like? Do I have a tremendous residue load from last year's crop that was loaded up with tar spot or anthracnose or any other disease that might be present in that residue? Now all of a sudden we have a conducive environment. We have the pathogen. Mm-hmm. Well, if our plants are susceptible host, guess what? I think we're at risk for disease. And so the environment's unique in each individual geography. It's very easy to explore what that environment is that's triggering. And I think more farmers need to look at that. If you have disease currently in your field, why? What are the conditions that are contributing to that disease?
Yeah, that's great points. And I think it kind of leads into the next thing is like environment. How do we track that? And Luke, you kind of do a lot of our data work at Calibrated Agronomy. How do we track that from a data side? Like what sensors do we use? What can a guy use to deploy in his field to help track the environment and see the triggers that would happen for disease?
Well, one of the first things you probably want to look at is the track the soil temperature and soil moisture and get a handle on what the heating and cooling cycle is of your soil, and then try to find a way to measure what pathogens are active in the soil. And we have ways to do that. And part of our research focus this year is actually to track the soil temperature and moisture, and then bi-weekly on certain research fields, pull samples and then have that soil genetically sequenced to measure what pathogens are present. And that should help us get a handle on, in our geography, when diseases start to populate and repopulate and ramp up, beyond just knowing the natural load that is in your soil that you've built up over time. You have to start with what is my base load, so you know and you can get an idea how difficult it is going to be to change this.
Yeah, and I think for farmers, that's kind of a different concept. Even into the industry, we talk GDUs as an ambient air temperature. At least that's how I grew up in the business. You talk about GDUs to the growth stage, but I think one thing that even Jared and you guys work on that's unique is soil GDUs. And Jared, you got out west, you guys really do that with certain crops, knowing the GDUs, right? And when it triggers disease. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing to consider, whatever diseases you fought last year, you may likely fight again this year. And then there's specific diagnostics you can start tying to those diseases. And one of them is soil growing degree days, particularly for like Rhizoctonia or Fusarium. Those are all triggered by a certain accumulation of a growing degree day. Nematodes are also, they'll accumulate. Nematodes will also ramp up based on an accumulated growing degree day value. And so there's a lot of metrics in the industry, a lot from the fruit and vegetable world, that can help guide a farmer in knowing what maybes coming on through his environment. But it takes sensors and technology to give you those eyes to see, so to speak.
Yeah. So those are good points. The other thing I kind of want to hit on is, like, let's just take one disease, and I think one that's kind of common, at least here in Iowa, and you fight it. I think we fight it everywhere. Is white mold in like soybeans, legumes, right? And I think you've got a good case study, and Luke can hit on this. Is white mold shows up? Why does it show up? Is it environmental? What causes that to show up, and how do we treat it? I think because it's every grower I've talked to this year so far, the guys that have had it historically, they're going back to the fields that have white mold, and they're all concerned that they're going to get it again. Mm-hmm. So, like, Luke, like, go into like how we test for that, like with white mold specifically. How would a guy plan to combat white mold through a testing phase?
Well, probably the first thing you want to do is get a baseline of what inoculum is in the soil already. And then from there, you can pinpoint which fields you're potentially going to have the issue with. And just to start off with, first, I would just looking for resistant varieties. That's something the industry's been pretty good about, is having rankings for different diseases on a lot of, especially corn and soybeans. So get a baseline on what our risk is. And then the first step to combat that risk would be to pick out varieties that have a good score, as in they can resist it just from the get-go before we get into managing a disease when it shows up.
Yeah. So like when we do our soil testing, we'll see white mold be high in the soil. To Luke's point, we use varieties to combat that. But I think the other side of it, the things that we've employed, and I think you've done a lot of this over our West, and we've done some of it here, is once you know you got white mold, how do you get proactive in front of it? How do you use that predictive technology, that, tools that we got to be proactive and get ahead of that white mold? So Jared, why don't you walk through right now, like, guys growing beans, worried about white mold. They're just before R1, mm-hmm. and we're worried about white mold. What could a guy employ for methods, testing, or products, or nutrition, or whatever, to get ahead of it?
No, great questions. I think number one, right out of the gate, if you've had white mold in the past, it's likely you still have that pathogen in the soil. It may not be active. It may be sitting there dormant, because white mold will overwinter for a number of years as sclerotia in the soil. And so it can be present. But what has to happen, the plant has to become a susceptible host before the white mold can actually go on and infect the plant. Generally, what happens, based on the years of SAP analysis that we've done, we see that when we drive our free nitrate level and free ammonium level too high in the plant, meaning that nitrate in the plant's bottlenecked, the plant's like, man, I got too much nitrate here. What do I do? Well, the plant's sending triggers now, or signals. I'm not healthy. I'm feeling sick. Well, that's usually the trigger for white mold to come on. So step number one, I tell farmers, is learn and know and understand what your free nitrate and ammonium load is in your plant. And that's the beauty of SAP analysis, is that's the only plant testing method on planet Earth that actually measures all three forms individually. And so that would be a great step to determine if your plants are on a trajectory to becoming a susceptible host. Odds are, at some point in time in this environment, the environment and the pathogen, they're going to be right. It's primed. Well, we can do a lot as managers and overseers of the crop to prevent the plant from becoming that susceptible host.
Yeah. To that point, Jared, we've talked a lot about this with our growers and our SAP data set this year. And this is how we can kind of use this, and we have used this data, is this year in our part of Illinois, and it seems to be pretty widespread too across Iowa, in that we had a great warm April, dry April. A lot of the crops went in already really good. We flip around and we turn off cool, cloudy all through May. Yeah. And we're getting rain after rain after rain, which is good. We need the rain. And then the first half of June is kind of a mixed bag. And then we finally start to warm up. Well, out of about 700 sample sets we've taken so far this year, I think about 90% of them are bottlenecked with nitrate this year, because we've created the environmental factor is there, and we can't control that. because we can't control the weather. But there's our risk factor, and we've already identified it now. Now, we've been talking a lot about that is a nutritional risk factor on just efficiency of getting the plant to process that nitrate. But is another trigger and a risk factor, as we've just identified here, is we already have that bottleneck. We've identified it. So now let's keep that in our head as we go through the season.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, from a management perspective, we've historically, as a whole, as an industry, have tackled white mold with fungicides, right? There's all kinds of recommendations on the fungicide side, which work. We know they work and they're needed at times. We all run fungicides when we need them, right? But from a nutritional standpoint, what nutrients, say I'm just a grower and I got white mold and I want to eliminate it. I got that bottlenecking on. I don't know I have it, but after listening to this, I'm like, well, maybe I got it. How do I go attack that from a different perspective than going and saying applying 2 shots of fungicide or something? What would be their recommendation to do that?
Mike, the recommendation I would lay out there to any farmer across the globe would be to apply to your crop the building blocks that allows the plant to take nitrate into a total N formation. That usually resides around iron, copper, carbon, sugars, sulfur. Those are your 5 primary building blocks that allows the plant to take nitrate and ammonium and convert it into total N. Get it out of the system as free nitrate and ammonium. And so that's where we focus. And I think, Luke, you've said before, the SAP data is all showing that those major elements are limited. And so within Calibrated Agronomy, we formulated products to solve the dysfunction. You got the Flow Max micronutrient lineup, zinc, copper, iron. We've got Backbone as a carbohydrate source. Sulfur, that's relatively easy to access. So yeah, the tools are there. And I think the beauty is within this group, we've got the tools and the know-how to make it all roll.
So Jared, you got basically a case study out with your potatoes, am I correct? Yeah. Potatoes out west that you actually, am I right? You induced white mold onto a plant. And just walk us through that whole scenario.
Sure, Mike. You're making me confess in front of all the world here, but I get it. It's real experience, and I'm happy to share because if anybody can learn from my mistakes, I think it's a value, right? So man-made white mold, it's real. We had a scenario where we had a potato crop that was starting to trend a little low on its nitrogen level. And so, man, of course, we know we got to drive yield, we got to drive quality, and we need that nitrate. And so we made the decision to fly 30 units of ammonium nitrate just to give us a fast bump. Usually ammonium nitrate's good because it gets in the plant within 4 or 5 days. Well, we flew nitrate, and within 4 or 5 days, guess what? We had a flare up of white mold like crazy. But what was ironic is in the plant sap, we spiked our free nitrate level over 700 parts per million. We were averaging about 30 parts per million. We spiked it up over 700. And then the free ammonium level also jumped like up to 180, 200 parts per million. It was ripe to make our plants a susceptible host. And so we recognized real quick, okay, this is man-made. We caused the problem. Ideally, we can also stop the problem. And so like we've just said earlier, we made a corrective action, put an airplane in the air where we flew on a little extra sulfur. We flew on copper, iron. We had Backbone, and some bioag in the mix. We flew out a recipe that gave the plant the building blocks or the essential elements to turn on the enzymatic processes to make nitrate become total N, to make ammonium turn into total N. And we saw that happen. We made that application through the airplane, and within a week, white mold was dried up, shut down. The plant was back about a 95, 97% conversion efficiency, and we're back cooking with gas again.
Yeah. And I think that leads into something that's pretty interesting to me that I've learned as we've as a group gotten together and learned together is like, I really didn't understand disease once it got on the plant. One was hosted on the plant, is that it's using the plant as a food source, right?
Yep.
And different diseases use different food sources, but like white mold is ammonium nitrate. Like that's what it wants to survive. And it needs a point of entry, but then it's sucking that nutrient out. Am I not correct?
Oh, yeah. Desiccating the plant, essentially.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of interesting once you kind of learn the agronomy of it and study it. At least for me, I was in retail for a long time and just took it for granted, I guess. Young and dumb, right?
Yeah, we've all been there. You know, a great reference for any farmer out there is the book by Don Huber, Mineral Nutrition and Plant Disease. You want to learn how micronutrients can affect plant disease, read that book.
Yep. It
shows you how micronutrients have modes of action. So...
yeah, they've helped the plant defend itself.
Yes.
They need to be there for the plant to defend itself. And it's nature. It's like the plant's got its own immune system.
Absolutely.
And we just got to support it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about the disease, we kind of hit on it earlier a little bit about the residue. But why is that so important from like a biological standpoint on disease and the residue? And being able to break that down from a biological perspective.
Well, so regardless if you have disease on the leaf surface, and a lot of times, even if you do spray a fungicide, like we see this all the time in our crops with tar spot being kind of a new disease. So sometimes it will come in later. And so you will get a benefit, say, out of a fungicide for holding it back, but it will still come in later in the season.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that inoculum's on the leaves, you've keep populating the inoculum. Now we go out there and we harvest, we throw and scatter all that back on the ground. That inoculum is there. It's going to want to harbor in the soil. Almost all of these diseases we deal with are at the end of the day soil borne, and that's where their environment is. So as we keep building up that in the soil, we need to outcompete it. And one of the best ways to outcompete it is to use the competitive exclusion principle and build beneficial biology that is antagonistic to the pathogenic biology. And I know we've shared at some of our meetings of that. I mean, it's a real thing that's studied, and it's a real scientific principle that you put two species together that are antagonism, you grow them out in a petri dish by themselves, they will both grow. Mm. If one's antagonist to the other, you try to put them together, and one will just be outcompeted by the more powerful one for resources, and so it just won't grow. So the concept is to always try to have good, healthy biology in the soil to outcompete the pathogens, and that's a good starting point. And we've started to look at this. We're trying to gather more data on it, where we've used long-term biological products, and we're seeing in about a set of 60 different sites we've tracked that we are starting to lower the disease pressure. We're not eliminating it. We're not killing it all off. We are suppressing it. So therefore, even if your plant does become a host because of a nutritional deficiency or something like that, there isn't as much there to just take over. That's one of the important principles. Keeping it at bay, that bad pathogens at bay in the soil to begin with.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically what you're saying is, say I got 100 tar spot spores out there, just generic number, and I'm going into this season and I got 100 of those, and I don't like normally in my soil I have 20 beneficials that compete against that. Well, if I got 100 bad guys, quote unquote, and 20 good guys, who's going to win, right? Bad guys are going to outtake. Yeah. So what Luke's saying, or what you're saying, is like I gotta apply 100 more good guys,
yeah,
to compete against that to get the numbers in the right spot.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Exactly. So Mike, I got a question for you. You're no foreigner to this concept.
Yep.
What's been your experience where you've taken scientific data that's proven you have disease pressure, you've deployed the competitive exclusion principle using biological products? BioAggie is one of the products you've used, I believe. Yep. What's been your experience? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, for us here in Western Iowa, we're 100% no-till. So we don't, like some people tillage, bury the trash, bury it underneath and probably suppress it somewhat by that method. The residue lays on the ground. So as yields have climbed with our growers over here, we inherently grab more biomass, more residue. Mm-hmm. So for once the path was, we just want to get rid of the residue so we can plant it in the spring.
Right.
But then we started talking disease and you start looking, and that first dawned on me, in 2022, the fall of 2022, actually, where we're sitting across the road, the field. The guys just started combining, and I went out there and I looked down and I was looking through the trash to see how the combines were operating. And lo and behold, I found tar spot. never seen it before. And I'm like, holy cow, what is this? And talked to a few people, and we're pretty sure it's tar spot. So I'm like, okay. So fast forward to next year, I'm concerned because we hear all the bad stuff from Luke's area, Illinois, because they're the hotbed for it. And our counterpart, Clint, I called him one day and go, what's the recommendation out here? And he's like, well, they're talking right now 2 shots of a high-end fungicide. And I started doing the math. Well, that's $50 an acre. I'm like, holy cow. I mean, like, we'll do it if it needs to be done. It's probably the thing we need to do, but there's got to be a better way, right?
Right.
So in our group, we discussed, and kind of your knowledge, and we were kind of doing already, unbeknownst to me, we're headed down that path of breaking down the residue to break that disease cycle. And we just doubled down on it. We'll put it on the fall. Now we're putting it on the spring with a burn down, putting it in the furrow. And the thing about our disease management here is where we've implemented that practice 3 years ago. It wasn't a ROI the first year,
yep.
But now the fields that we've constantly been doing that with the biology, with the residue breakdown, they're our best looking fields and our best yielding fields right now. They're on that path, and they've broken that disease. Last year, take for example, we had a second year corn on corn, no-till farm, and we didn't spray fungicide on it. Did nutrition with it. I mean, we did get disease late on the season, but it ended up being number 1 or top 5 corn yielding field for this customer. So, and we just implemented those practices into the program and took those dollars and put them into nutrition, biology defense, and all the things we just talked about.
So the win is real.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a commitment.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily I work with some growers that are willing to turn the light on and say, let's do this.
No,
but
awesome.
it's a step process.
Yeah.
We haven't got every field that way, this squared away. We got fields that are ways from that, but we're slowly making that progress. And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah. You're getting there. You're making progress. So I think that's a positive way.
And Mike, that's a good point to bring up just on stewardship and not overusing fungicides so that we still have them as an option if we do need them.
Yeah.
If we overuse them, then the efficacy of them is going to go down. Because when me and Clint were first started bioag management, and I was having a conversation with an old contact I have at the local university in the biology department. And she was some internal study they had done, and she was explaining this principle to me where they had taken bin run soybeans just out of a bin at the elevator. And then they had genetically tested those to see what pathogens and beneficial biology was just living on the seed. And then so they have their list of what's all on there. And then they treated them with fungicide. And then they tested it again. Well, what you did was it wiped out about everything that was on the seed. So it wiped out all the pathogens, but also wiped out some of the beneficials. They couldn't survive that either. But then they let the seeds sit. And then they tested them again a few weeks later. And what they found is that what came back first was the pathogenic fungi. And they had come back with a passion. They had the numbers were higher because we'd got rid of anything that could outcompete it. We basically nuked everything. And then the pathogens are always in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they came back, they had nothing to outcompete. The problem was actually worse after they'd been treated. So it's something to keep in mind on just stewardship of using fungicides.
Like the old adage, too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Overuse it, and then we create an environment for it to survive. And so final thoughts after we discussed and everything here. Anybody who's listened to this calls us in and says, I'm square one. I haven't done anything you guys are talking about. We're in the middle of the growing season. Where do I go? How do I start tackling this? What do I need to do?
Mike, I would probably just offer just a couple tidbits of initiation. Number one, visually, do you see or have you had disease? If you have, then you're primed for risk, bottom line. Secondly, are you measuring? Have you pulled any analysis, soil analysis or plant sap analysis or tissue analysis for that matter? Have you done any of that to confirm what your nutritional status is of the plant? If you haven't done that, those would be some really good places to start. And then from there, if you're in the middle of the season, you have disease and you're worried about it and you're ready to go and jump on this new philosophy, then what available rides do you have? Do you have a fungicide ride coming up that maybe you could substitute? Maybe those are some things we look at. Substitute fungicide out, nutrition in, beneficial biology in. Those would be some things I would look at.
Yeah, and the guys who are irrigating, it's a great opportunity, right?
Yeah, if you're irrigating, you got a 1,400-foot sprayer going around through a pivot or your drip system and you're irrigating frequently, man, 3-4 ounces, small micro rates of these elements we've talked about today would be a huge, huge success.
So Luke, okay, take me to the next step. He kind of talked about in season, but like coming in this fall, you're going to get in the combine, start harvesting, and you're planning for 2026. What are the steps he needs to do, or whoever, to keep on this process?
Well, I would just look at your overall residue management. If you are no-till, of course you're no-till. Just common sense residue management that we all kind of follow, and then look at if you don't have that data on what your disease load is, that baseline, let's work on getting that in the fall and starting somewhere with some type of baseline data. And then on the second thing on top of that is look at if you have disease and you disease comes in late season, you can see it on the leaf and you're going to go spread that onto the soil. Let's look at using an intervention like a beneficial biological product to help break that residue down and get that process started this fall. So then when we go into next spring, hopefully we've done a little bit of out competition of what is there, but also have started the journey of gathering the data of what is my baseline load here. And how difficult is it going to be to correct this? You won't be able to get an idea. You'll just kind of be chasing your tail unless you have some type of idea of how bad or good it is. You may find out that you don't have a big load of, pathogenic fungi or that in the soil, and maybe this is your first year experience tar spot like you did, so it wasn't there. But now we understand that we're going to start building it up. But at least we have that baseline to know that I'm not already completely loaded, and maybe at that point I can intervene a little quicker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Mike, can I add one more? Just one more. It's free, so I'm going to give it to you.
Go for it, man.
I think every farmer needs a team. And I think he needs, if he wants to go down this road, he needs to assemble a team of guys that can help him navigate. Because there's a lot of unknowns that might come your way. But for the right team, these unknowns don't have to be a worry. There's the people out there. Calibrated Agronomy is one of those organizations. I think we can help people navigate the uncertainty.
Okay. No, great points. He's Luke Holst. He's Jared Cook, the man from Idaho, the original Iowa State, he likes to call it. And I'm Mike Evans. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to us. Calibrated Agronomy. You can reach us at calibrateyouragronomy.com, and we'll see you next time.